You're listening to Cards to the Moon, a podcast about trading cards from both a collector and investor perspective. We hope you'll stick around for the ride as we take a deep dive into the state of the hobby, share some hot takes, hopefully some useful advice, and fun stories along the way. Hey guys, welcome back to Cards to the Moon. This is episode 251, and it is another Friday edition. My name is Clark from 5cardguys.com and 5cardguys on Instagram and YouTube. Co-hosting with me, as usual, is Hyung of Integrity Sports Cards. John's away for the next couple of episodes, but he should be back with us after that. All right, off the top today, this is our first recording since the Sport Card Expo, the largest card show in Canada, wrapped up for the year. So first, I want to ask you, Hyung, what you thought of it, what were some takeaways from the event, and then afterwards, we wanted to share the story of a deal that our friend Roy made at the expo, which is pretty cool, and it incorporated a strategy we discussed on a previous episode of Cards to the Moon to get the deal done. So yeah, I'm excited to tell that story. But first, Hyung, how did you like the event overall?
So one, that it was fun to watch that deal. I'm just gonna say, it was just
teasing it, okay?
Because it's just I'm just thinking about it now, and I'm just like, man, it was literally like textbook of what we said, and then the execution part was great. But overall, the Sports Card Expo, I had a blast. I was only there for a day. I was exhausted by the end of it, but it was good to see familiar face. You got to see. It was very different, like I said, with Fanatics Fest, and we expected that because we've been at the expo. Still a lot of hockey, like we expected, but overall, I thought it was a good turnout. I thought there was a lot of people there. There was a couple times where it was rammed, and I will say that it left a really good impression because I won this canvas, this Upper Deck 2024 rookie canvas.
Yeah.
Sick. Bunch of NHL names like Celebrini's on there and stuff like that, but it was a canvas. They do it every year. I think there's maybe only 25. It's out of 25 based on the previous years. So I was very happy winning that in a random Upper Deck raffle. So shout out to Upper Deck for hosting that. You hooked up the right person because you got a free advertisement space. But
free plug,
yeah. But overall, I enjoyed it. I thought it was one of the better expos over the last few years. So yeah, overall, no complaints.
Totally, I agree. And you didn't even go on Saturday, but Saturday was rammed.
Yeah,
Friday was rammed.
Pictures.
Saturday is it was crazy, right? So the hobby is alive. and on Friday we also split a box of SP Authentic, right? We ripped together and it's it's kind of expensive, but we wanted to do something fun. We hit a Connor Bedard Future Watch. Hit one,
yeah.
But not the autograph, just
not the
plain.
Autograph. Still a decent card. I think over the long run, it will be worth something, sure, right? But
as long as Bedard does what he does, yeah.
We pulled the Chicago Auto thinking that we hit the jackpot, but that's the worst. It's
Luke Phillips. It ended up being Luke Phillips, not Connor Bedard. If you follow me on 5Card Guys, you already saw the Instagram reel. We pulled the wrong Blackhawks auto, but that was kind of funny. What else? I got the same vibes. There was a lot of hockey, but you know what? I saw more baseball this time around. It's becoming a little bit increasingly more diverse in terms of what kind of sports cards there are at the expo.
Right. A lot more baseball, I would say. A lot of Pokemon too.
That's growing too. Yeah. Definitely. That's CSC is doing a amazing job, just even them alone having their own section.
You know what? Very smart play by CSC, I would say. They've grown a lot. CSC is Canada Sports Cards here in Toronto, and they're a Facebook group I think originally started, but they've grown into a pretty big community here in Canada. So they set up this, I would say it was a whole corner in the Sport Expo, right?
Yeah. That was big. It was big, and it was always crowded. And a lot of kids, as you would expect, but it was kind of cool to see just them growing over year after year. So that was awesome. All right, let's talk about the deal. I want to set it up by starting that our other friend Will, who loyal listeners will know is our backup podcast co-host, he assisted on this deal by being the guy who found the card that Roy ultimately got in the trade in the least likeliest booth. So let's take it from there.
So the whole thing was, I think it was John that mentioned it in our podcast in terms of tips at the expo, saying that, you get an idea of what type of dealer they are. So if you have, for instance, a bunch of hockey slabs and then you see one baseball slab, you'd be more willing, that guy is more willing to deal on that baseball slab because he probably made a trade to kind of acquire that, but he's not necessarily married to it. He would like to get rid of it. So that was the context of the Will assist. So Will, being a loyal listener, pulled that practice and applied that. And it was funny because Clark, first thing we did was went to the PSA booth. So I would say you get the other assist, because what happened was we had to wait in line for that Ovechkin that gemmed, which was amazing for your buddy. Congratulations, by the way. You got the assist because you put us right in that location, because Will, Roy, and I, we just decided to kind of take a stroll while you're waiting. And then that's where Will immediately recognized this Paul Skeens first Bowman Chrome Sapphire. It's black and it's numbered to 10.
Crazy.
So it was a PSA 9. So it's a pop 2. And he identified the slab in a bunch of Pokemon slabs. We're talking the whole booth was Pokemon except for that. And Will's like, hold up. This is exactly what John was talking about. Right? And then that's where he called myself and Roy over. And, Roy started negotiating right away, which, he did a good job. He controlled kind of like that whole negotiation. There's a lot of back and forth. There was a couple times I was like, oh, I don't know if they're too far off. Right. But I was there
Roy
as
had
the
a
advisor.
bunch of Pokemon cards too.
And that was his thing, was he had a bunch of Pokemon cards that he graded. He pulled and graded that PSA 10 that brought enormous value. So at the end of the day, he was in it for half that amount. So whatever trade value it was. So I think it was I want to say 2,200 or whatever it was Canadian. He had probably half of that amount invested in those slabs. So Roy was looking for something where, he just graded these so he could get rid of them. He was still in profit, but find something that potentially could grow where he didn't have to sell 10 different slabs. Right. So this was a marriage for Roy in terms of his strategy. What he was looking for maybe a few month flip. So it was a perfect timing where, baseball starting to die down, and then, but in March, April, it's going to get really hot, and someone like Paul Skeens, who's not going to throw a single pitch until next March, is pretty much, his prices are protected, and you're buying at a pretty low price, which I think Roy overall won in terms of the deal. Just thinking how much he's actually in that Paul Skeens black first Bowman Chrome, and then his strategy to sell it in March, I think he's going to do really well. I think he's going to, it's a deal to where Paul Hickey would be like, you know what? That was a good deal. That was a great flip. That's a great profit.
Yeah, that's an amazing story. And I know in hockey you only get primary and secondary assists, so I appreciate you giving me the secondary.
You get the secondary.
But Hyung, you get the tertiary. Okay, I know it doesn't exist, but you're
I'm just an advisor.
Yeah, exactly. That's something. That is something, because you knew about Paul Skeens, his potential.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure Roy didn't know anything about Paul Skeens, really. No. In terms of this. And
the crazy thing is, a year ago or 2 years ago, we probably wouldn't have done this deal because we weren't a believer necessarily in pitchers, right? We would never invest in pitchers like that. But Paul Skeens has changed the narrative a bit.
Yes, 100%, and it's funny you mentioned that, because I want Chris Begg back on our podcast, because we made fun of him the whole time about
it's his time to shine,
buying pitchers. Yes, to be fair, to be fair to Beg, we need to get him back. He could glorify pitchers again. But it just might be Paul Skeens and Ohtani when it comes back. But anyway, amazing story. I love how everything turned out. And, when it happened, we were like, we have to talk about this on the pod.
Team effort win. Yeah, absolutely.
That's right. All right. This is usually good for a Friday episode, but we got more for you guys today. The past couple of Friday episodes, we've been playing a joint podcast episode between myself and Paul Hickey, as Hyung just mentioned. And he's the host of the Sports Card Strategy Show. And we have lively discussions, just like we did this past week, about the hobby. And in this latest collaboration, we talk about his strategy approaching a card show with some great advice on how to find a good deal. And we also talked about trying to profit from buying raw cards and then grading them. And we used a number of baseball cards as examples, specifically the ones I'm trying to target in the off season. So I think it'll be a good listen, and you could tell us if you agree or not with what we discussed. So enjoy this joint episode I had with Paul Hickey.
What's going on, Cards to the Moon and Sports Card Strategy Show listeners? Of course, I'm Paul Hickey, and he's Clark Kim from Cards to the Moon and 5 Card Guys. We are collaborating consistently here for both of our podcasts, and good to see you, my man. How you doing?
Good. It's always good to see you, Paul. and just off air, we're talking about, maybe we could just dive right into it, because just off air, we're talking about how here in Toronto, we got the biggest sports card show coming up this Thursday to Sunday. It's called the Sport Card Expo. And listeners of Cards to the Moon, we just had our newest episode out today. And with my 2 co-hosts, we're just discussing strategy. Like every year we talk about strategy in terms of, how we approach a card show, and, how it's dependent also on the sports card market. Are prices coming down? So is this a good buying opportunity, or are prices still inflated and vendors don't want to take a loss? So, you might want to look to trade. And we discussed a bit about that. So Cards to the Moon listeners and Sports Card Strategy Show listeners, if you're interested, listen to the latest episode on Cards to the Moon. But what I wanted to talk to you about is, it's always good to get other people's opinions. And since, we have this collaboration, I thought it'd be a perfect opportunity to ask you, Paul, we actually met at FanFest New York City. So we've been to a card show, and I'm sure we have slightly different strategies in terms of what we're looking for and how we're trying to find good deals. So I'm curious if I can ask you that question. When you go to a large card show, or any card show really, locally do you have a strategy in mind when you approach it, or does it differ from card show to card show?
Yeah, that's awesome. I love this discussion. I think it probably differs a little bit from card show to card show, because to me, it's all about mindset, and it's all about what are your goals for that individual time period. So that would be why it would differ from card show to card show. So for example, just throughout the year, you might have a different mindset. You might have different goals, not only hobby goals, but life goals and things like that. But generally, I have kind of a set of rules for how I approach a card show. And I've become pretty strict at following these rules over the years, because when I first started going to card shows, I found it very, very easy to feel obligated to make purchases. You're standing right in front of people, and you feel like, it's a good thing to feel like you want to support them, but oftentimes at card shows, the pricing is not where it should be.
Right.
And the vendors are willing to play the game of negotiating with you. And I think that for the first time card show patron, it's important to realize that you shouldn't feel obligated to buy anything from anyone. You definitely are in a situation where there's a lot of, there should be a lot of competition for your business, because you're literally in a room, especially at the Sports Card Expo, you're literally going to be in a room with probably I'm guessing it's between 500 and 1,000 tables or something like that.
Yep.
It's probably just a massive show. So consider it like a situation where people have to compete for your business. Another thing that's different for first-time card show patrons is that I think most of us are used to shopping online now. and not just outside the hobby, but definitely inside the hobby, where you have eBay and you have other marketplaces that you can search for things. So it's very different, because when you go to a card show and you think about, I want to try to find this one card, that actually can be a trap. It can be kind of a dangerous trap, because if you're looking for only one card, or maybe let's say specific cards, I mean, it might be that you're looking for 50 specific cards. Like, if you're looking for specific cards at a card show, that can be a trap, because card shows are not designed to necessarily give you good deals on cards that you are hunting for. Card shows are designed to go the other way around. If you're looking for good deals, think of it like, I need to be open to picking any card that is the right card at the right price,
Right.
at the right time for the right player. So it's like, it's almost like this reverse engineering, like how you would normally shop on eBay. Instead of searching for a card, you should go into a card show searching for a deal. So that kind of goes back to my first rule, which is like, don't feel obligated. So having said all of that, I would just go a little bit more specific. So the way that I approach a table with that in mind is I will comp out, say, 2 or 3 cards in the showcase of the vendor, and I'll comp out 2 or 3 cards in like value boxes, and I'll look through dollar boxes real quick if they have dollar boxes to see what kind of cards they have. And if the prices that the dealer give me out of the showcase and out of the value boxes indicate that I could put together, say, 10 to 15 cards in a bulk deal and buy everything for, say, 85 to 95% of the sticker price, or the, AKA the recent comps, right?
Yeah.
Then I think it's worth staying at that table and trying to put together a deal. And you should be able to do this in like 3 minutes. And so like you should, if you're like me and you're looking to make money flipping sports cards, this is the approach. I could see some listeners going, whoa, this is super intense. I just want to go and have a good time and like try to find cool cards. And if that's your thing, that's great too. But again, you should still do the negotiating part of it, because while it may seem like you might get a little bit of FOMO, like if you leave the table, they might sell the card. That's true. But chances are you could probably go find that card on eBay. So really, the dealer should be competing for your business, and you shouldn't necessarily feel obligated. And then one other thing is, like, if you're setting up as a vendor, I think it's important to remember that you should price your cards to move. Unless you're into, like, if you're a lot of vendors, I've actually I have a lot of empathy for a lot of vendors that I've met at card shows over the last few years, because a lot of them were people who bought in to their inventory in 2021. Whereas, as you know, and maybe the new listeners aren't familiar with the fact that basically if that's the case, pretty much you're underwater on everything.
Right. Yeah.
And so I have a lot of empathy for those vendors who are underwater. And so they're struggling. If they price the stuff to move, they're going to lose a lot of money. So I think what a lot of people do is they overprice their stuff. But I think it's important to remember that, like, if you're a vendor, so you've paid, a couple $100s to set up a table, and it's your time and it's your time organizing and everything like that. Don't put cards out on your table that you're underwater on that you think might go back. Like your Mike Trout card is a good example, right? Like I wouldn't want you to, sorry to bring that up, but
okay.
I'm also messing with you. Like your Mike Trout card, don't put it out on your table, but maybe your Luca card, maybe you do put it out on your table.
Sure. Right.
Because you got room on that. Now that's a lot, that's a lot in like one answer. And there's definitely more. I love this topic, but I think
that's good.
It's what I've learned. Like I'm very hard on myself when it comes to wanting to improve based on my previous performance. So when I approach a card show, it's like game day. Yeah. And then I want, like, the next card show I go to, it's like the next game, and I want to perform better. So that's kind of
No, that's awesome. No, I appreciate those insights. And especially like what you said about, because I've fallen into that trap of, looking for specific cards. And then when you do find those specific cards, you almost feel obligated to make a deal or overpay because you're like, oh, I finally found this card in the sea of vendors and the sea of cards that are at these large card shows. So that's really good advice on trying to search for a deal. And one thing to add to that was when you look at vendors and you'll know certain comps of certain key cards, and that right away you could tell if this vendor's reasonable in terms of their pricing, right? Because if you find, we talked about the silver Prism Luka Doncic 2 weeks ago on our collaboration pod, and you already know how much it's going for right now in recent comps. And if a vendor is overpricing it by 2x, then probably you're not going to find any good deals at that vendor. But if you find another vendor that has reasonable comps, then you're more likely to find other cards at reasonable prices where, like you said, you could cobble something together to find a really good deal. So yeah, great advice. I was just thinking that by the time I aired this on our podcast, the Sports Card Expo will be over, but at the same time, there's so many local card shows throughout the year. And I think what you said is just advice that's applicable to any card show that you go to in the rest of 2024 and heading into 2025.
Yeah, thanks, man. And I think, like I mentioned, mindset, and I think what I mean by mindset is like, so you made me think of when you said like you search and you're looking for the one card and then you find it. Like it's almost like not only do you feel obligated to make the deal with the dealer, but you also, at least I start to think about, well, I told my wife and my friends and my kids that I was coming here. They're all going to ask me, what did you get? They're going to be excited for me and all that. And so because I'm not necessarily the collector and I'm more of the flipper, I actually tell everyone around me when I'm going to a card show, more for myself than for everybody else. But I'll say things like, hey, look, I'm going to meet people, build new relationships, which is true. But it's really like, the reason I do that is because I don't want to come home, not have bought the card that I was excited about because it wasn't for the right price, and then have everyone around me in my life think that I had a bad time and feel like maybe it wasn't worth my time. The reality is it is worth my time. I love going to card shows. I think if you can have just develop your own mindset of like, don't overpay for the card, but don't just not overpay for the card. Put yourself in a situation where you have goals to build relationships with people, because I think what I've seen happen a lot is that there's deals that happen around card shows, but not always at card shows. Right. Like there's people that they meet each other and they exchange contact information. And then even though somebody was looking for a particular card at a price at the show and didn't find it, because you built that relationship, you could still get that card later from that person at the price you wanted, even though maybe it was overpriced at the show. And I think that can be just as fulfilling as going to the show. So I just encourage people, like, it's basically a way, like, take the pressure off of yourself when you attend the show and think of it more of as like a long game of, this is one thing that I'm doing to enjoy the hobby, meet people, build relationships, and then maybe there's some follow through later. Because the more shows I go to, I keep seeing the same people, which is cool. I like that. Like, I meet new people, but I also see people like old friends. So
yeah, right.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I might have to clip this part of the episode right before the expo because this is valuable advice. So appreciate it, Paul.
Yeah, no problem, man. No problem. So good stuff. Well, thanks for asking me. I feel like the last couple of recordings we've done together, I've talked too much and not let you ask me questions. So I'm glad we led with that, because I think that's good stuff.
Good.
Okay. So I asked Clark to give me as many cards as he wanted that he's looking to buy raw and likely grade in the end of sometime to the rest of 2024 or even into 2025. And I think did I specifically ask you for baseball cards? I think I might have.
You did.
and the reason I did that is because, and I could be wrong, but what I know about you so far is that's kind of your number one sport.
True.
Correct?
Yep.
So, and baseball, I would say, is my number 3 sport behind football and basketball. And so I enjoy kind of understanding from a baseball collector and investor what they're looking for. And I have the cards in front of me. So Clark gave me 5 cards. He didn't necessarily know why he was giving me 5 cards. One was to have a discussion around it and learn from him why he's targeting these 5 cards. So let's start there. And then I'll reveal kind of like what my side of this is as well. So
Sure.
You're looking for a 2023 Topps Heritage Gunnar Henderson Real 1 rookie on card auto, a Jackson Churio 2022 Bowman Chrome first prospect auto refractor out of 499, a Jackson Holiday auto out of 25 from 2024 Topps Chrome. So this would be a rookie auto orange refractor, a 2023 Topps Heritage Real 1 red ink Corbin Carroll auto special edition serial numbered out of 74. Is that right?
Yep.
Okay. It doesn't have to be serial number 73 out of 74. Just want to.
The way you asked me too is like what's on my watch list. So I just put
those
specific cards.
Okay.
Yeah. But it doesn't have to be 73 out of 74 specifically. No.
Okay, I figured that was the case, but that copy paste from the watch list. Love it.
Yes.
Okay. And then 2020 Bowman Chrome Bobby Witt Jr. Mega Box Mojo Blue Refractor Auto out of 150. So these are all obviously great cards, top players. Not surprised by any of that. Right off the top, I thought, okay, Clark's looking for young players who have already hit the major leagues. Thus, maybe their prospect market isn't as inflated as it once was. So might be a good time to buy in. Obviously, still a lot of upside. Am I correct in that? And then what else? Why else are you targeting these cards?
Yeah, no, those initial reasons you mentioned are bang on. Like they're past the prospect hype. I feel like these players are, at the start of the 2023-24 season, we're beyond that. So they've been called up to the MLB, and like always, the players kind of the shine kind of wears off a little bit. And for some of them, especially like someone like Jackson Holiday, they just struggle in the big leagues. So then obviously the value depreciates, and some more than others or faster than others. But I like to look at those players where they have that top prospect pedigree. The talent is still there, but in my opinion, they just have to adjust to major league, competition. And so I feel like those are the players I like to target, right? And in terms of the other, so I kind of wrote down my notes on 4 or 5 factors I look for, generally speaking, when I look to invest. Okay, so the player is one of them. So it's someone that's off the prospect type, but they still have potential, and their card prices have depreciated somewhat. The card brand. So there's the Topps Chrome, Bowman Chrome are elite for baseball card collectors, but then there are other ones that I feel are undervalued. Like you see a couple of Topps Heritage brands that don't go as much, but I feel like there's a solid base of collectors that like those type of cards, and I feel like it's more of a mid to long term play. So, and especially the red ink, which is serial numbered. We're talking about the Corbin Carroll example to 74. So there's that. That's the third factor, the rarity. So a lot of these are serial numbered cards. I'm not looking for base cards anymore, even if they're autographed. And this, they're the ones I look for. Some of them are numbered to 499. Some of them are numbered to 25. It's all relatively within the same price range or budget that I'm comfortable with. So obviously for a higher caliber player, you look at Bobby Witt Jr. He's probably the best out of that list. And I chose the Mega Box Mojo Blue Refractor. So it's not the pure blue, it's not the Bowman Chrome, but because it is a Mojo Blue Refractor, the prices aren't going to be as high as those other Bowman Chrome, even Topps Chrome, pure solid blue refractors. So, but the Mojo Blue Refractor is still a beautiful looking card, and it's still numbered to 150, like most blue refractors are. So, I like to it's a balancing game, right? So the higher caliber the player is, you might want to look for a card brand that's undervalued because the prices will, not be as high. And then the last thing I look at is the value of the card. Is it a good time to buy right now? Like Jackson Holiday, the number to 25, which is an orange refractor. Another little piece of information I like about this card is that it's a color match. The orange with the Baltimore, the Royals with the blue. So I look for little things like that as well. You look for the value, and the holiday cards have come down a little bit, but not as much as I would like. So you kind of have to play the waiting game a little bit too. So some play, Jackson Churio is a good example actually. Like he got the same kind of hype as Jackson Holiday, and Churio for some reason is, I think performed better than Holiday. Yet people are just gravitating more towards Jackson Holiday for whatever reason. On our podcast we call this hobby logic, things that don't make sense anywhere else in the world except in the hobby. So it's one of those hobby logic things. But Jackson Churio is a great example where the upside is still tremendous, and he's still a young guy, and you could probably get a nice lower serial numbered card at a better value. So those guys are kind of like, that's in a nutshell, I guess. That's how my brain thinks about which players, which cards I like to target, especially during the off season.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I love all of that. In fact, all of that is great strategy. And I would say guidelines, we call them guidelines at nooffseason.com, where, you want to, we generally say you want to look at, when we say the right card for the right player at the right time, what we mean is the card down in comparison to where historical data based on that player or like players indicates that it should go up, right? And so that's kind of the right time part. The right player, it's got to be like a guy with the market, so you hit on that.
Yeah.
And then the right card, I think it's interesting that, in football and basketball, there's a lot of releases from Panini that are just crap. And baseball might be a little different in that top. I mean, would you say that's true actually? Like, would you say that baseball, because I think what you've done here is interesting. You've brought up another strategy that we don't typically look at, which is there a release for a top player where maybe it's not their top card and maybe you don't have to go that high? Maybe there's more margin actually in going to a release like a Heritage or something like that, as long as it's a short print or a serial number. Would you say in your experience is baseball unique because of the manufacturer and the way that they have the release schedule and things like that, and just the amount of releases for baseball being different?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's particularly unique, but because there are still sets in baseball that's garbage as well, right? So,
can we name them off real quick? Is it like Gypsy Queen and like some
yes,
stuff like that? Okay,
that's a good one. Topps Cosmic, that's a little bit gimmicky, right?
Yeah.
So there are sets that are just if you're looking to invest or flip, you probably want to skip those. But then there are the ones that, Stadium Club, Topps Heritage, I feel like have the history and the tradition. That those are the sets that have been around a while. And, for some reason, they're just, in my opinion, they're not as valued as they should be. So, and the cards look really nice as well, so those are kind of the same, like I would call them like a tier 2 set if I'm categorizing them.
That's awesome. So, and it's interesting. And so my angle at this was to, other than learn from you on all of this, I also had a specific angle, which was to talk about this tool that I built back in March called the Formula. And the reason I built the Formula at nooffseason.com is, and I've talked about it on the Sports Card Strategy Show at length every episode since March, is there's like literally hundreds of thousands or even millions of cards that we could all be buying. And if our goal is to make money, either in the short term or in the long term or somewhere in between, there's got to be some kind of a way to prioritize what we're buying at any given time, because there's so many options. So the premise of the Formula really is to be it's a rankings tool, but it's to help people prioritize their purchases. And so essentially what we do is we look at raw to grade, we look at already graded, and we've started to look at graded to raw, where you can crack slabs and sell them raw for more than you paid for them in their slabs. I think you and I have talked a little bit about this, but what I wanted to do is just basically take these cards, run them through the Formula, and give you the results on whether or not any of these would make you any money on the raw to grade, right? Like we think, and that's not to say that, like, look, you've done a great job targeting, and I'm not saying you've bought these cards, but you've done a great job narrowing your focus down to these 5 cards to put yourself in a position to, even if it's not a raw to grade win off the bat, maybe these do go up in value. To me, that's the hardest thing to do. It's a little bit more straightforward to go raw to grade and win that way.
Sure.
And then obviously when you pair that with a performance spike, it's even better. So I went ahead and ran these through the formula. And I'll briefly explain like what that means. So basically we take a 30-day average of comps. And that's your target cost. So we give everybody at nooffseason.com a target cost. And then we look at, depending on the card, most cards this works, but if it doesn't, based on how long the card's been on the market for, we slightly modify it. But we look at a PSA 9, PSA 10 upside, and then we cross-reference that with the gem rate. So, I mean, if gemrate.com says that it gets 80% 8s, well, then obviously we factor that in. But we give a projected average sale price based on, if you buy it for the target cost and you grade it, what are your likely grades across your submissions? Okay. And then what's your projected average sale price for that? So obviously it's like the higher the PSA 10 upside, the better. Right. If it sells now, it's really hard to see this happening, but sometimes it still happens. If it sells in PSA 9 more than raw, that obviously helps. And then if it has a high gem rate, it obviously helps. But of course, it's still on the hobbyist to buy one at the target cost and find one that could potentially gem, right? Yeah. So, but it's a tool built to say like, okay, if you're able to make as many of these plays within that same card as possible, you increase your chances of the ROI. And it's ranked based on ROI at nooffseason.com. So when I ran your cards through the formula, and I think this could be because most of them weren't, other than the Jackson Churio refractor out of 499 auto, the others were so short printed. Although there was enough data on the Bobby Witt Jr. Mojo refractor, the Jackson Churio refractor out of 499, and just those 2 out of the 5. Unfortunately yielded a negative return from a raw to grade standpoint based on the projected average, like what you would have to pay for it, what grade you're likely to get back, what you would be able to sell that for. Right. Yields a negative return if you were to go to the only depending on the grading. Now that's not taken into account, Bobby Witt Jr. has the best July of all time. And, that could still happen. Right. Yeah. But what I can tell you is that when we look at these players, I can tell you the cards that the formula gives the best ROI numbers for. Okay. And you can see here where the more cards that we add to the formula, the more a picture becomes clear of if you're looking to invest in a particular player, which cards you should buy. So like from a raw to grade perspective, Bobby Witt Jr.'s 2022 Topps Chrome update auto, which is a $232 buy-in, which is pretty close to the one that the last comp of yours is 367 according to Market Movers. Okay. Sorry if you guys have like I know you guys mentioned Card Ladder on your show. Hopefully it's okay that I mentioned Market Movers on your show. Okay. Yep. So that 2022 Topps Chrome update auto, 232 buy-in point, 812 upside in a PSA 10, according to the formula, which gives a 270 in a PSA 9. Based on the gem rate and all those factors, you're likely to get a 622% average sale price on a 232 raw to grade purchase. This includes your grading fees. It includes we take out taxes, shipping, marketplace fees, and everything. So this card will return you likely 97% on your investment of your $232. Now, obviously, if you only buy one of them at $232, that's a shot in the dark. You better feel really good about if that particular card is going to gem or get a 9. If you're able to buy multiple of these, you just increase your chances at that 97% ROI. So that's Bobby Witt Jr.'s number 1 card per the formula. I know we're running out of time, but in terms of Jackson Churio and Jackson Holiday, well, we can talk about Gunnar Henderson real quick. Gunnar Henderson's number one card per the formula is his 2019 Bowman Draft Chrome First Auto, just the base auto, 35% ROI on a raw to grade. Okay. Jackson Churio and Jackson Holiday. So Jackson Churio's number one card would be actually his 2022 Bowman Chrome Purple Auto out of 250, 33% ROI. And Jackson Holiday, and again, this is just raw to grade, right? 2022 Bowman Draft Base Auto, first. So 196 buy-in point. Still has now this might be a little bit skewed by the 365-day average cost. I'll say just a little disclaimer here, but it is yielding a 108% ROI on a raw to grade. So again, this is not necessarily meant to say you're guaranteed to make 108% ROI if you buy and grade that card. Rather, if you're looking to prioritize, if you have a budget and you're looking to prioritize which cards to buy out of all of them, this tool helps you do that. So I think, again, your 5 cards, like I asked you for them, are you even looking, like, would these be cards that you would even be looking to make a raw to grade quick flip on? Or when you look at these cards, are you thinking more of, these are cards I could hold for the long term and just wait until they go up because I'm so confident that I'm buying in at the right time and that these guys at some point are going to go up?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, with these 5 cards in particular, I view them more as cards that I can hold to mid to longer term because they're more rare. And if I, and it's a good point that you made earlier too. Like a lot of it's dependent on their performance. Like I'm hoping for that performance spike in the season to come, in the 2025 season. So that's part of the equation as well. That's why that's the player factor involved. And I just like to look at more rare cards that are serial numbered. So it's interesting that when you're doing your analysis, a lot of these raw to grade, the ones that the formula recommends are base cards because in a sense they are more liquid as well because the price point's more attractive and you could buy in at a lesser price, the grading, and then of course if it gets a PSA 10, you could probably flip that more quickly. So that part was interesting, but not totally surprising. But yeah, I think we kind of talked about this before in the previous podcast we did together. But like with base cards, if you want to make a good profit, you might want to buy multiples. That takes more work, and we already said how lazy I am generally speaking when it comes to that stuff. That's but that being said, there is certainly a play there to do it that way. So I could see that point as well.
Hey, one more thing I wanted to run by you for today. We can talk more about this throughout the next several times that we collab. Is my strategy. I did a recap episode a couple of weeks ago on what worked best in 2024 and what didn't work as well. And one thing that I'm taking into my personal, I'm not saying that everybody should do this. In fact, I'm very outspoken on the Sports Card Strategy Show that this would be very hard to do, and it's not necessarily a recommendation. But for me, what I'm going to do is I'm going to box myself into 5 players. I'm only going to invest in 5 players over the next 12 months. And in those 5, and I'm still deciding who those 5 players are. I'm going to reveal it in an upcoming episode of the Sports Card Strategy Show. There's going to be obviously a whole rationale as to why I'm picking the 5 that I'm picking. So there's a lot to consider, but my question to you is, like, we all know I'm just the flipper. You're a mix of everything. How do you place parameters around what you buy? Is it something like that you do ongoing? Do you do it year by year? Do you ever think through like, hey, I'm gonna really like try to box myself into only buying certain types of cards or certain players or things like, how do you think through that?
Yeah. For me, I guess in a way I target probably 5 players as well, just in terms of GOAT players that I like to hold long term, right? So those are always fairly consistent, you know? So Luka's off my list because I was able to pick up a Luka. And, if I sold my Luka, he would be back on the list because I would always like to have another Luka in my collection just to hold more long term. But, there's the Steph Currys and I don't know, with your 5, are you looking across all sports or in one particular sport?
Yeah, I'm looking across all sports.
Okay.
I feel like it needs to be a mix of more stable, like one needs to be a super stable asset that doesn't necessarily have any volatility. And I'm challenging myself because I've never really done vintage. So I want that to be like a vintage player.
Okay.
And then I want to go across all sports. So I want to do at least one baseball, at least one football, at least one basketball. And then I'm not like the hockey, soccer, tennis, golf markets aren't necessarily not. And actually hockey, I think, is exempt from this statement because I think the hockey market's like super strong and like there's liquidity there, there's opportunity there and everything like that. So I haven't ruled out hockey, but in terms of anything other than basketball, baseball, football, I'm hesitant to go there because there's those, I've been in those markets before and they don't move as quickly. And so to box myself into 5, there has to be 5 that I can move in and out of quickly and that there's enough action. Otherwise, if I'm only doing 5 players and I don't give myself enough action for 12 months, then it's going to be really hard. But yeah, I'm thinking, look, maybe there's a women's basketball player that's in there. Maybe there's, maybe there's like some different things that I need to do with like maybe college, like American football obviously is huge, but maybe there needs to be a college player in there and not just pros. And so I'm thinking through like what would be the right mix of risk and budget, action, all those different things. So I'm pretty close, but there's going to be a lot of players that are left off. And I think that actually this is a teaser for the audience. Like there's going to be a lot of plays that I'm giving away on the Sports Card Strategy Show because they're going to be for players that I can't make them on. So,
okay. Yeah, you got me intrigued, so I can't wait till you reveal those 5 players. But no, that helps me understand what you're trying to do. But for me, going back to the questions, those 5 players are always on the list, and I'm always looking. But in terms of like, what kind of cards I like to target throughout the year, it's more like I don't know. I feel like it's whatever the new set is. Is there? Do I feel like there's opportunity to go after? There's always a few cards that everyone wants. Those are always the cards that are always overpriced. So I never look at those. But then I always look at the secondary ones, and and then, like I think that are interesting to not just myself but to other collectors. They're maybe looking a little bit off Broadway, so to speak, So those, I like to make those fun plays every once in a while too. But usually, in terms of financial investment, I don't go too crazy with those, right? But it's still fun to just do that to be entertained and to have fun in the hobby. So I like to do that.
For sure. I mean, I saw my profit margin in 2024 dip huge because I just bought into way too many players. I tried way too many things. And it makes sense when you do that. You're really like, you can't and shouldn't spread yourself too thin if your goal is to basically like have this be a steady source of income, because you're not going to win all your bets. And so you might win a couple. I'll tell you, like Paul Skeens and Caitlin Clark ended up being like my biggest wins in 2024. But then there were like other players like, say, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, and some other guys that end up yielding, because I go so deep into so many different areas, trying so many different things. They eat into that profit margin. And so that's where the pick 5 came from. It came from like, you can't go so deep. You have to box yourself in, because then it's going to force me to make smarter decisions. It's going to, if I'm looking at a particular player's card and I know that I can only buy 5 players, it's going to make me go deeper into those 5 players to truly find the deals, do the research, and be more careful about things. Because I think we're all at that point of overspending and then trying to figure out how to get out of it and all that stuff.
Totally. Yeah, just having a deeper conviction on those 5 players. I like that approach. It simplifies things, and I I'm going to save this question for our next episode we do together. But because you're more into football than I am, than us Canadians are, generally speaking. But to your point, part of the question was like, when do you bail on QBs? Because this football season has been crazy in terms of like, expectations not being met by a lot of teams. And I just wrote a quick list like Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers, Bryce Young, Anthony Richardson, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Jordan Love. You know what I mean?
Everyone's down. CJ Stroud, everyone's down.
Exactly. So
it's crazy.
To your point, if you spread yourself too thin, you're like, oh, one of these QBs are going to hit. The 5 losers are going to, bring you under
absolutely
for sure. Right?
Crush you. Yeah, that's a great point. All right, I'll talk about that next time. There's a good teaser for the next collab. All right, man. Super easy to go 40 minutes with you. Sorry about that, but hopefully everyone got some good stuff. I sure did. So thanks, Clark.
Same. All right. See you in a couple weeks.
Man. Talk to you soon.
Hey, thanks for listening to Cards to the Moon. We'd really appreciate you subscribing to our podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can also connect with each of us on Instagram at 5cardguys, or you can follow Hyung at Integrity Sports Cards, or John at TradeU at Recess. You can also check us out at 5cardguys.com. Thanks again, and hope to connect soon.